rate is 1.75%, and it's a 20-year loan term. We do have the ability to award subsidy for projects, also principal forgiveness. We can forgive part of the loan, and that depends on your affordability index, which is the ratio of your water rate to your median household income. Next slide. Another program we have, and this is new, pre-construction loans. We'll be taking applications in mid-January, and we will take applications year-round. So there's no set period for when we'll accept applications. It'll just be available year-round. This program can be used to fund your planning document. If you need to update or do a planning document, it'd be eligible for funding. Any design work, alternatives evaluations, permitting, cultural review, environmental review, any type of pre-construction activity is eligible under this program. Eligible entities are Group A community water systems. So again, any water system, regardless of ownership, and not-for-profit non-community water systems. The maximum per jurisdiction is $500,000. It's a 0% interest rate, 2-year time of performance, and 10-year loan term. So again, this will be available in January. Next slide. Another new program we started this year is the water main replacement loan. This funding can be used to replace any existing water main or transmission main. We'll take applications in August, so we just ran this cycle. We'll offer it again in August 2021. We can fund both the pre-construction and construction activities. So again, we can fund the entire design and permitting of the project and then the actual construction. This funding is limited to our Group A not-for-profit community water systems serving fewer than 10,000. We'll have probably $10 million to award, and the maximum per jurisdiction is $1 million at a 1.75 interest rate and a 20-year loan term. So again, in August of next year, this will be available. Next slide. We do offer grants for consolidation feasibility studies. So this funding allows interested jurisdictions that are looking at a consolidation, which is defined as 2 or more systems combining into one larger system, or where there's a change of ownership where a small system becomes owned by the PUD or a water district. Applications will be accepted August 2021. We'll run this cycle every year. We just ran it. So we'll offer it again in 2021. This funding can be used to study a consolidation and see if it's feasible, to assess existing infrastructure of the system that is being considered for new ownership, legal fees, public outreach, reports, connection fees. It can be used for a lot of different activities to promote a consolidation. To be eligible to apply, you must be a Group A not-for-profit community water system, water district, a PUD, city, county, town. Those are all eligible to apply. And then the system being considered for consolidation must be serving fewer than 10,000 people. These grants are a $30,000 max, and again, offered in August 2021. Next slide. We also have emergency loans. The applications are accepted year-round, and for us here at Department of Health, emergency is defined as any time your system is out of water. It doesn't have to be specific to a natural disaster event. This funding can be used to fund the temporary repair or replacement of damaged infrastructure, to rent generators or temporary treatment equipment. It can also be used for the permanent repairs. To be eligible for this funding, you must be a Group A not-for-profit community or non-community water system serving fewer than 10,000 people. The maximum amount per jurisdiction is $500,000. It's a 0% interest rate, 2-year time of performance, and 10-year loan term. Next slide. So that's an overview of what we have here at Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. I encourage you, if you need more information or have questions, you go to our webpage that's listed on the screen and in the slides, and then you can always call me, be happy to talk to you. So thanks, Kari.
You're welcome. Does anybody have any questions for Janet? Leslie?
So nobody's entered anything into the chat yet. If you have any questions for Janet, go ahead and post them in there, type them up, and we can get those to her later. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you. So next we have Ecology Water Quality Combined Funding Program with Daniel Thompson, Department of Ecology.
Oh, okay, thanks, Kari. Let me just start my video just for a moment and I'll turn it off. But I just want to say hi to everyone. So let's see. Hi, here I am, Daniel Thompson, Department of Ecology. Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can see me. Unfortunately, I can see myself as well. I'm going to go ahead and turn this off because it's caused problems in the past. So what I want to do is I just spend really just a few minutes and talk about Department of Ecology's Water Quality Combined Funding Program, or the WQC. WQC is it's an integrated funding program. It's currently composed of 4 different funding sources, and 3 of those we can use to fund infrastructure projects. And as I said, WQC, it's an integrated program. We've designed it to simplify things for applicants, at least insofar as we can do that. So for example, we have a single funding application, a single review process that utilizes 2 independent reviewers from different ecology regions. And we issue a single funding offer list that covers all the funding sources and the types of projects that WQC can fund. We also have a single funding guidelines, even though the 4 programs are covered by different statutes, different rules, different policies. And it's a big 275-page document or so. But it's organized so that for the most part, you can just go to the sections that are applicable to your project type and you don't have to read through the entire document. So as I said, there are 3 different infrastructure funding sources that are in the WQC. By far, the largest is the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, or the CWSRF. Janet just talked about the DWSRF. CWSRF is a low interest rate loan program. But in most years, we also have the authority to award a few $1 million in forgivable loans. And a forgivable loan is basically a grant, but it's done under our loan program. CWSRF is funded through a federal grant and a required state match, of course, but it's mainly funded from recycled payments from previously awarded loans. And CWSRF is a very flexible funding source, and it can fund pretty much any part of a wastewater or stormwater infrastructure project. Another infrastructure funding source is the Centennial Clean Water Program, or Centennial. Centennial is a grant program. It's funded from different state sources depending on the budget year. Most of our Centennial funding goes to wastewater construction projects in hardship communities, but it can also fund a very limited range of stormwater projects as well. Another infrastructure funding source in the WQC is the Stormwater Financial Assistance Program, or SFAP. SFAP's a grant program. It's usually our 2nd largest funding source in the WQC. SFAP's funded from state sources, and specifically now it's funded from the Model Toxics Control Act, or MOTCA fund. SFAP grants can be used only, it's more limited than CWSRF. It can only be used for stormwater projects. So the general types of infrastructure projects that WQC can fund are wastewater facilities and stormwater facilities. And for each of these, we can fund pretty much the entire project, from pre-planning, such as doing a feasibility study, through planning, such as developing, writing, or updating a facility plan, through pre-design, such as doing environmental review and other pre-design work, through developing final design plans and specifications, all the way through construction completion. So pretty much from beginning to end, we can fund those wastewater and stormwater infrastructure projects. And all 3 of the infrastructure funding sources have some sort of hardship subsidy options. For example, CWSRF can provide 50% forgivable loan, 50% standard loan combination for any pre-construction work for wastewater or stormwater projects in smaller, less affluent communities. Centennial, we can provide up to $5 million in grant for wastewater construction hardship projects in smaller, economically challenged communities. And there's no match required for that grant. And SFAP, which is a grant program with a match requirement, provides reduced match grants for stormwater projects in smaller, less affluent communities. Next slide, please. So under all three of the infrastructure funding programs, only public bodies are eligible to apply and be awarded funding. Eligible public bodies for CWSRF and Centennial are relatively broad and include cities, towns, counties, any of the 29 federally recognized tribes in the state, and also special purpose districts such as sewer districts and irrigation districts. Eligible applicants for, or more limited for SFAP, they include cities, towns, counties, and port districts. Our WQC funding levels vary from year to year, mainly because they're dependent, at least in part, on state budget appropriations for Centennial and SFAP, and also federal grants for CWSRF. But over the last several years, the average amount has been roughly $120 million for CWSRF, but that's growing. It's $150 million this current funding cycle. It's been roughly $15 million for Centennial over the last several years, and roughly $35 million a year for SFAP. And currently we run an annual funding cycle for WQC. We start taking applications and we conduct annual, applicant training workshops across the state in roughly in middle August. And then we stop accepting applications in middle October. It actually turns out to be exactly a week ago that we stopped taking applications for this particular funding cycle. So we have roughly a 2-month window in which to submit applications. Then we do a lot of internal processing, and eventually we issue a draft funding offer list in middle January. And that draft list gets provided to the legislature during budget development and also triggers a required public process. Then we usually make some funding adjustments based on feedback and budget appropriations, and ultimately we issue formal funding offers in the form of final funding offer lists around the beginning of the state fiscal year on July 1st. Which is when the state budget kicks in and the appropriations in it become available. So that's a really quick overview of the WQC. Of course, we have provided much longer and more thorough overview at our funding workshop. So, if you're interested, you're encouraged to attend our funding workshops, which we do in each August. And so it'll be next August 2021, when we'll open up our next funding cycle and do our applicant workshop. So if we have time for questions, I'll try to answer them now, or I guess if there are questions that come at the end when it's kind of open, I'll try to answer them then. But if you have questions even after today, here's my contact information, or if you want to take the time, you can navigate our web pages from the link I provided on the slide, and you can find more specific information, more specific contact as well. So with that, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Daniel. Leslie, any questions for Daniel?
Yes, so we did have one question in the chat, and as far as the water quality combined funding program goes, is it possible for someone to apply for all of the funding for this?
Yeah, and in fact, when you apply, you don't even pick your funding source. You just apply, and we find the funding source that works and that is to the most advantageous to the applicant. So when you're applying really for any of the funding sources that are applicable and can fund your project.
So you have another question as well, thank you. Can energy efficiency renewable energy projects be funded at wastewater plants?
Yes, and as part of an overall project. So you apply for a project, you've got some energy efficiencies, so it would be part of the project. And a real advantage of that is we have something called Green Project Reserve, and for our top-rated Green Project Reserve eligible projects or components of project, we can provide up to 25% forgivable loan.
Thank you. The final question that I have in front of me right now, and I think this is for David, Kari, and Kathy, will all of these slides be available at some point for us to refer to later?
Yes, these slides will be posted to the ICC website as soon as we can get them up.
Thanks. That's all we have.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Daniel, for presenting. Next, we have Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, with Jackie Andreessen, Department of Commerce.
Thank you, Kari. And I'm going to go off video as well to lessen my distraction and to help with connection. So good morning. Today I have the privilege of sharing with you an overview of the Community Development Block Grant Program I'll be referring to as CDBG. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, allocates approximately $13 million each year to the state CDBG program, which is housed in the Department of Commerce. This year, the Federal CARES Act has allocated 3 rounds of CDBG coronavirus CDBG CV funds through HUD to the state CDBG program. The CDBG program provides funding to small rural cities, towns, and counties to enhance the quality of life for low and moderate income LMI residents, thereby strengthening the entire community. The majority of funds are distributed statewide through our general purpose grants application cycle, with approximately $11 million available per year, awarded on a competitive basis. Maximum grant amounts vary depending on project type. Up to $30,000 is available for planning only activities, up to $250,000 for micro enterprise assistance, up to $500,000 for housing rehabilitation programs, and up to $900,000 for construction projects. General purpose application materials via a Zoom Grants online portal are made available in March. Applications are due in June, and grant awards are announced in September. Approximately $200,000 is made available annually for the CDBG housing enhancement grants. Now, these grants are awarded to eligible rural Washington state cities and counties as supplemental project financing for necessary off-site infrastructure and related facility costs to improve the affordability of new housing trust fund projects. As I mentioned before, the state has been allocated 3 rounds of CARES Act funding. CV1 funds are granted to CDBG rural city and county governments based on the number of LMI persons in each jurisdiction. Plans for CV2 and CV3 funds are being developed, since these funds may be used in urban and rural areas, as well as for state activities to address COVID-19. For more information on how these funds are distributed, you can visit the CDBG website. Next slide, please. Now I'll talk a little bit about the flow of funds. Commerce receives funding directly from HUD for the state CDBG program. The program then passes these grant dollars down to the local governments through a competitive or formula-based application process. Eligible local governments are non-entitlement rural cities, towns, and counties, and this means they are not entitled to receive CDBG funds directly from HUD, as other larger local governments do. A complete list can be found on the CDBG website. Special purpose districts, public housing authorities, community action agencies, economic development councils, other nonprofit organizations, and Indian tribes are not eligible to apply directly to our state CDBG program for funding. However, these entities may be a partner in projects and a subrecipient of funding through an eligible city, town, or county applicant. Now, shown here is a breakdown of the percentage of funds that historically go to general CDBG program activities. CDBG activities must principally benefit low and moderate income persons. Low and moderate income is defined as 80% or less of the county median income. The general purpose grant program can fund water, sewer, streets, community facilities, and fire protection systems, support affordable housing and economic development, as well as community planning. The fire station photo shown on this slide is from a Grant County Fire District Number 3 project in George, Washington. CDBG ineligible activities include government buildings, such as a city hall, facility operations and maintenance, and new housing construction. If you have a potential CDBG project for 2021, please connect with CDBG staff with questions surrounding eligibility and project readiness. Public services grants help address the root causes of poverty and help with low-income families and individuals regain or retain self-sufficiency. The wide range of activities can include housing counseling, food banks, legal aid, temporary housing, and mental health services. With the CDBG CV1 funding, cities and counties are partnering with assistant agency subrecipients to fund a variety of public services, including utility and rent or mortgage payment programs and micro enterprise assistance. Also, some of the funding facilities that address COVID-19. Next slide, please. Okay. The rural communities that CDBG can serve include cities and towns with populations of less than 50,000, not participating in a CDBG entitlement urban county consortium, and counties with population of less than 200,000. Now looking at this map, the non-entitlement areas are shown in yellow. Again, these areas are eligible applicants. And the areas that can get their funding directly from HUD, the entitled areas, are shown in green. A few of the non-entitlement counties, shown in yellow, eligible applicants, do include entitlement cities that are not served by the state CDBG program, such as in Skagit County, Anacortes and Mount Vernon, in Whatcom County, Bellingham, in Benton County, Kennewick and Richland, and in Chelan County, Wenatchee. All of these cities mentioned and a few more are located in counties we serve, but due to their population, they are not eligible for the state CDBG program. CDBG grants come with a lot of federal requirements and reporting. We encourage you to reach out to staff as you develop your projects. Please visit the CDBG website for additional information. It includes how to reach staff, more detail on each CDBG program, guidance material if you're thinking about applying, and a management handbook as grantees as they work through their projects from start to finish. The photo shown here is from a 2016 reservoir project located in Brewster, situated along the Columbia River. Thank you for your time and interest in the CDBG program. I hope this overview has provided some insight into our program and the wide range of activities that it can fund.
Perfect. Thank you, Jackie. Is there any questions in the chat?
Yes, we do have a couple questions. So the first question was asked before you talked about special purpose districts specifically, but just to clarify, do special purpose districts like water and sewer district access CARES Act funding through the counties?
Yeah, I believe that it's a formula based for the CV1 funding. And those do get allocated to the counties. And as mentioned, there's different rounds of funding. So the CV2 and 3 are going to be allocated a little differently.
Thank you. And then second question, can you say a little bit more about micro enterprise assistance? How is it defined?
So as a definition, so these are local assistance programs that are basically to spur economic development. And they can be in a variety of different avenues that they're performed and who performs them. So I'm trying to give an example here in my head. A lot of them have training involved. So they're actually bringing in trainers to provide individuals with skills to help them succeed in, and the other thing for this is they're only, the definition is 5 employees or less for a micro enterprise business. So those are the different entities that can qualify to get assistance for that funding.
Great, thank you, Jackie. And I do see that we have in the comments from Karen Rowe, micro enterprise is a small business with 5 or less employees, including the owners. And that's it for the questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jackie, for presenting. And our next speaker, USDA Rural Development, Janice Roderick.
Hi, this is Janice, and welcome to the presentation today. Glad you could join us. I'm going to turn my video off and start the presentation. So next slide, please. So go ahead and hit the next slide. Thank you. Okay. So what I wanted to touch base on a little bit today was the 2 programs under USDA Rural Development, the Water and Environmental Program and the Community Facilities Program. Since we're looking at the water, wastewater, and stormwater, I'll only touch base a little bit on the Community Facilities Program. And that is that is a loan, basically loan program. We do have a little of grant, and that covers projects like city halls, fire equipment, fire halls, police stations, police equipment, streets, roads, and bridges. So today we're going to target mostly on the WEP program. Next slide. The WEP program provides financial assistance for water, stormwater, and solid waste disposal. It is for rural populations of less than 10,000, and eligible applicants include municipalities, counties, special purpose districts, tribes, nonprofit corporations, and it can include homeowners associations. Next slide. The funds may be used for the water supply and distribution systems, waste collection and treatment systems, storm drainage, and solid waste disposal. Other costs eligible for reimbursement are to acquire water supply or water rights, legal and engineering costs connected with the development of facilities, acquisition of rights of way and easements, and relocation of roads and utilities. Next slide. We provide up to loans of 40 years on projects, and can provide grants to some projects depending on the need and the median household income and other factors. We look at similar systems of communities the same size. Right now, the current interest rates are determined each quarter, and right now they're between 1.25% and 2.125%. And that again depends on your the MHI factor. You can apply anytime during the year. The ideal time is really right now, the big October through February. Our funds end September 30th. Next slide. As if you're applying for construction, there is a requirement that the environmental report and the needs to be completed. We have a guide for that, and you would consult with your local loan specialist to determine the type of environmental you may need to do. This is done early in the application stage, and at the end I'll give you some contacts with a map for that. Next slide. So there is a new program called RD Apply. It actually has been in place for a couple of years now, that you can apply through. We do have a preliminary engineering report requirement as part of the application, and there is an ability to use our electronic PER to complete that. We do have a Buy American Iron and Steel requirement on construction, and then we do not require Davis-Bacon. That's one of the questions that we get asked often, that the state wage requirements can be used. Next slide. And these are your contacts for the area. We have a person in Mount Vernon, and then Olympia. We have Wenatchee and Yakima. And you can call them and talk to them about your project. Last year, we had a very good year of projects, and we funded about 21 million in loan and about 7 million in grant for water and waste. So we used all our funds that came to our state. Any questions?
So we do have one question in the chat, and I'm trying to clarify if this is specifically for you, Janice, or if it's for all funders represented today. But the asker wanted to know, do any of you all have any case studies of how a particular community availed itself of multiple intersecting loans and grants across all of these domains?
Yeah, I think we have some really good study cases where we have partnered on difficult projects, and that we could share that with anybody who would be interested in that. And I'm sure Kathy's going to talk about tech teams, and that's a good way of starting that partnership process.
So that's a pretty complex question. Why don't we save it to the end once everyone's had each of the programs was presented info, and then we could talk big, complicated multi-funder projects.
Good idea, David.
That's a great idea, David. And I just received further clarification. It's for all of the program managers out there. It was the intent, and it'd be interesting to see how a community managed to avail itself of the program. So yeah, great end question. Thanks. That was it.
Perfect. Thank you, Janice. So next up, we have Community Economic Revitalization Board, CURB, Janae Delk, Executive Director and Tribal Liaison.
All right, thank you, Kari. All right, next slide. So who is CURB? For anybody who doesn't know, CURB is a rural independent policymaking board. That's a really fancy way to call it a cabinet agency under the governor. The board was developed in 1982, and there's 20 board members. There's 6 small and large businesses across the state, as well as stakeholder representatives, which cover the ports, counties, cities, and tribal, as well as an economist, a general public member, and then 4 legislators, 2 from each chamber, and then 4 ex officio members from Employment Security, Department of Revenue, Department of Transportation, and Department of Commerce. Those are non-voting expertise members. They're there for advice to help our applicants as well as our board. And we do function mostly off a revolving loan account to do our funding. Next slide. So CURB is designed to finance public infrastructure construction to support private business development and assist in local governments with economic planning. We are different from the other funders that you'll hear today. For infrastructure funding, most of the time you hear about health and safety, and we are strictly for economic development to support private businesses to create jobs, leverage private investment, and help increase tax revenue at the local level. Next slide. So our eligible jurisdictions, as you see, are vast. Pretty much anybody out there who is considered a local government can apply to CURB. Quasi-municipal corporations, just in case you don't know, cover school districts, fire districts, library districts. So if they had a project that fit our niche, they could apply as well. Next slide. And then we have 4 programs that we currently administer. We have planning, and that's specific for economic development, as well as broadband. Those come with their own minimum requirements, depending on which is the focus of the planning. And then private business, if you have a private business, we have committed private partner. They're the ones driving the need for the public infrastructure, and we help site expand and retain those businesses, create and retain jobs, and complete private capital projects. And then prospective development are for you've done the planning, it's been completed, it's deemed that the project is feasible. If you build that infrastructure, then you can recruit private industry to the community, again, for job creation and leverage private investment. And then rural broadband, you've done planning, either with us or through another source. Again, the project is deemed feasible. The project is in a rural county or a rural community. The project is an unserved or underserved area for connectivity, and the project has a committed ISP. Next slide. And then eligible public facilities on the left are the activities that we can help pay for, and on the right are the systems that we can help improve. I have blacked out, or I grayed out the ones that weren't pertinent to this session and kept the ones that were dark. But as you can see, we have a wide net of infrastructure system improvements that we can help with. Next slide. So how CURB works, again, we're a little bit different than the other funders that you'll hear today. We are not a competitive program. We are first come, first serve. Our board does meet 6 times per year. So prior to getting to the board, staff provides technical assistance to our communities for project development. So what that looks like is that you have an idea, as crazy as it might be, you call us. In normal times, we come out to your community and talk to you, walk the dirt with you, brainstorm what that looks like and help with an action plan. Some of our projects lead right to application. A lot of our projects, we work with 6 to 18 months prior to getting ready to do an application. We help determine that it's the right project at the right time for that community based on timing and the need of that business most of the time, or connectivity through broadband and what has been done prior to that application. So once it's deemed it's the right time to apply, then applications are due approximately 8 weeks to our board meeting. And then staff works with the client to vet that application and project to get you ready for the board meeting. Because the day of the board meeting, you and if you have a private partner, they are there. Somebody from the applicant organizations there. Sometimes the EDC comes with you, the private ISP and the like. Come to the board meeting. They essentially pitch their project to the board, and you'll know right then and there if your project is approved. So 8 weeks from the time you apply, you know if you have funding. And again, we were first come, first serve from the very beginning. We don't compare our applications to any other applications that we're looking at the time. And the day of the board meeting, each project is presented and action is taken before the board hears the next project. Next slide. So then after that project is approved, each project has a pre-contract condition window. For planning, it's 4 months, and construction, it's 6 months. And project timelines. So for planning, projects can be done within 2 years. Average is 5 months. In construction, we allow 4 years, and our average is about 6 months from the time the contract is executed, that construction is complete. And then we do track our projects for 5 years after project completion, and that's the public project. So if there's a private project, that's separate from that. And then we use that information to report to the legislature every 2 years in the even years in a biennial report. Next slide. So here's just an overview of the investments we've done across the state from 1982 to 2019. We do have more to add in there, and most recently we approved a project in San Juan County, so we're officially in every county across the state. Next slide. And talking about project tracking, this is some of the information that we use when we're talking to the legislature. So we've invested $194 million since 1982 and leveraged $5.7 billion in private investment and created just over 35,000 jobs. And when you ever hear CURB talking about numbers, we're talking actuals. We don't talk about the estimates unless we're doing comparison. So that's the information that we're tracking when we come back to the applicant for our legislative report. Next slide. And I think with that, I am done. Is there any questions?
Yeah, Janae, you do have one question out there. Does CURB require sustainable practices to get the loans? This would mean energy, water, toxic material reduction, and tree retention.
Not statutorily. We're hoping that as we move forward, that communities, especially if they're using our planning dollars, are looking at what is right for their community to be sustainable into the future. Again, we are a loan program. So if you're taking out a 20-year loan for us, we need it to be sustainable at a minimum for those 20 years. But we don't have, as you saw our list of infrastructure systems, we don't have tight restrictions on what that looks like. So as systems or technology changes, we're able to be nimble with that as well.
Thank you. That's the only question I saw.
All right, perfect.
Perfect. Thank you, Janae. Next, we have a Public Works Board, Karen Burkholtz, Executive Director.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. I'm Karen Burkholtz. I'm the Executive Director of the Public Works Board. The board was created 35 years ago under RCW 43155. And the board is made up of 13 members appointed by the governor, 4 of whom represent the general public, 3 represent cities, 3 additional represent counties. We have 1 representative for public utility districts and 2 representing sewer and water districts. The PWB is a competitive loan program as of 2019. That was a change in the statute that carried with it a number of important things, which I will talk about in more detail on future slides. But one of those is project readiness, with moving from what used to be a list that was submitted to the legislature for funding, going to a competitive process. It definitely speeded everything up dramatically for us. And we were able to do this for the first time in 2019. On the slide, you will see the programs that we have under what we're calling traditional PWB, the competitive loan programs, pre-construction and construction, and then our non-competitive program, which is emergencies. The difference is the competitive program is open according to funding cycle, whereas the non-competitive program is continually open and ready to help communities with emergencies or unforeseen circumstances. Next slide. Our eligible applicants, as I mentioned, are cities, counties, special purpose districts, and quasi-municipal organizations. And under traditional, we fund 6 systems. All in total, PWB now has 7 infrastructure systems that they fund. We have roads and bridges, streets, domestic water, sanitary sewer, solid waste and recycling, stormwater, and our newest infrastructure system, which is broadband. And there is a separate presentation on that during the IACC conference. I encourage you to check that out. The picture there that you see is some lovely water. This is actually an emergency well replacement that the board funded in 2020 for the city of Moxie. And to let you know how quickly we can respond to these emergency situations, we were able to turn this around within a matter of weeks for the city of Moxie so that they could correct what should not have happened because they had just put in some new wells, but something happened to them and we were able to help them out, which is a really good thing. Next slide. In terms of our terms, you can read on the slides what we are able to fund. One thing that I would like to say that in terms of our funding is that it's very affordable. We have quite low interest rates. And one thing that we look at in our applications is fiscal condition, and that comes into play when we are doing the underwriting for our loans. Another thing to keep in mind if you're thinking about applying to PWB, and I'll go over that in just a minute, is GMA. Our program does require under traditional conformance and compliance with GMA, so keep that in mind. Also, consult and collaborate with your neighboring jurisdictions for a couple of reasons. One, a strength of PWB is that you may apply for one system, but you actually can address multiple systems through one loan. For example, you could do a road project and also do stormwater improvements or lay down broadband conduit at the same time. So having your scope well defined and that consultation definitely helps you be ready to go with a PWB loan. And also the multiple benefits are nice for you, for the communities, and for the environment. Next slide. I wanted to talk about what happens when PWB has funding, because right now we do not have funding in our competitive program except for the emergency loan program. We have requested $130 million from our Public Works Assistance account And we've also requested agency request legislation to stop the diversion of our funds early from 2023 to 2021. If we were to have a funding cycle, that would be set by the legislature as to when it would open. Our last funding cycle was open for a month, and we far exceeded in demand the amount of available dollars that we had. The application cycle would open. The duration of its cycle being open is to be determined, but the materials would be available online. The application process is through Zoom grants. There is a team that does the rating and the ranking of the projects and prepares those for consideration by the Public Works Board. And the Public Works Board then makes the funding decisions and authorizes staff to proceed to contracting and underwriting. So we're very, very hopeful that we will have a funding cycle for you next year in June or July. Please stay tuned to the upcoming legislative session and follow that. Or you can give me a call if you're interested in finding out where things stand with our proposals to the legislature. And with that, I believe I will conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Is there any questions in the chat, Leslie?
Yes, I do have one question. So you've been asked to define GMA?
Growth Management Act.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Karen, for presenting today. Next, we have Ecology Brownfields, Ali Firmal from Department of Ecology.
Hi there, everyone. I'm going to turn my video off. I just wanted to say hi very quickly, and I'll turn it back off to save bandwidth. So I'm Ali Firmal. I work with the Department of Ecology in the Toxics Cleanup Program, and I'm part of our Brownfields team, which includes other members of the Toxics Cleanup Program at Ecology, as well as Tina Hoschwender with the Department of Commerce, and members of EPA's Region 10's Brownfields team as well. And we work together to help communities investigate and clean up contaminated properties for reuse to meet community goals. And so, you know, the Toxic Cleanup Program's mission is to clean up sites. And the Brownfields Program's mission is to help those cleaned up sites become a community benefit. I've got a few examples here. On the left is a former gas station in Rosalia, which is a small community about an hour south of Spokane. This gas station was the only one for miles around for a period of time, and it had significant contamination in soil. That was cleaned up and is now a visitor center with a little museum component, and it has an electric vehicle charging station. Rainier Court in Seattle was an area that had a lot of mixed industrial use. There were paint factories and petroleum contamination, all kinds of different stuff. And Rainier Court Phase 3 became low-income senior housing. Kendall Yards in Spokane had a significant industrial history, predominantly rail usage. So there was metal and petroleum contamination in soil throughout. That has been a redevelopment project that has gone on for, I think, more than a decade now, and it has become both, it has a mixed use with commercial and retail, grocery stores and dining, and also a lot of residential, both some single family homes and a lot of apartments and condos. And it provides easy access to Spokane's downtown and to the Centennial Trail, which is a mixed use path that runs northwest of Spokane all the way over to Coeur d'Alene. Next slide, please. So why am I talking about cleanup at an infrastructure conference? So properties that have a history that requires some kind of cleanup are typically within previously developed areas. They often have existing infrastructure that can be tapped into. Redeveloping properties within the urban core allows pristine lands outside of the area to be preserved. Often these properties have historic buildings that can be preserved to preserve the character of a community and also take advantage of an architectural style that may no longer be in use. And, often these projects, cleanup is just a small piece of the economic development and community development puzzle. And we work, our funding that I'll talk about on the next slide is, focuses on assessment and cleanup of properties, but redeveloping a property requires resources from all over, both the other sources that you've heard about earlier in this presentation and others. The EPA has a very nice document, a Brownfields redevelopment roadmap, that talks about how cleanup fits into this bigger picture and helps communities identify the steps necessary to turn a blighted parcel into a community asset, and how to identify the funding resources that can participate in that. And so infrastructure and property cleanup and redevelopment go hand in hand. And often, meeting infrastructure needs requires that a contaminated property be addressed. Next slide, please. So I've outlined some different resources that the Brownfields team provides. EPA has a host of Brownfield grants that are provided on an annual solicitation. EPA Region 10 also provides a service called a targeted brownfields assessment, where a local government, tribe, or nonprofit can request assistance. And EPA's contractor will do the assessment, environmental investigation work, and provide the community with a report detailing that work. EPA also has provides land revitalization and technical assistance to communities, which can focus on different types of reuse and other planning activities and help communities get together implementation plans to figure out the different steps in redevelopment. EPA's Brownfields grants are, I said they were on an annual solicitation. Those are competitive grants. The grant cycle is open right now. It closes next week. And in general, local governments and nonprofits can apply for those types of grants. So for the state, the Department of Commerce, in addition to the many other funding sources that they have, they manage a Brownfields revolving loan fund that can provide grants and low interest loans to local governments, nonprofits, and for-profit entities for cleanup of Brownfields properties. The Department of Ecology has a number of different funding resources that are predominantly grants. Local governments are eligible for all of those funding sources. Other entities may be eligible depending on the funding source. Some are offered in biennial solicitations. Others are offered based on available funding at the time. The PLIA, the Pollution Technical Assistance Program, has a Pollution Liability Insurance Agency has a petroleum technical assistance program that can help entities clean up petroleum contaminated sites. They provide technical oversight and also do have a grant program as part of that. To contact us if you have a property or a project of interest, I have our contact information on the next slide. Oh, thank you. And what we ask is that you reach out to us, let us know, because what we will do is look at the details of the project that you have and try to connect it with funding resources that are available at the time or that we are aware are coming up. And so it's really important that you reach out to us early and let us know what you're thinking about so we can connect you to resources that are available. And I think if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
So I don't see any questions in the chat right now. Let you know if I get any coming through though.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ali, for presenting. That concludes our presentation for the funding panel. We do have some time left, so if there are any questions, please shoot them in the chat and we'll take the next, say, 10 to 15 minutes to answer any questions that people have, if that works.
So there was the question that we postponed asking about a case study around funding coordination. And so I thought I'd take maybe a first stab at it. So funding coordination absolutely happens. I think all of the programs represented here at one point or another have worked with each other to either co-fund or multiply fund a project. The one that always sticks out in my mind was Clickitat, which I had like 8 or 9 different funders. It was very complicated to manage, but it really leveraged to make that project possible. In recent memory, I think the town of Carbonado, because I know that there was ecology, USDA, there was a managed by Commerce, but a direct appropriation to the state legislature, and then there was TIB funding to repair the road surfaces. They replaced their entire wastewater collection system. So all 4 agencies, worked together with the local government to make that happen. I didn't see Daylene in the chat, or I would unmute her and have her talk about that. The common factors are, starting early, communicating with all the funders. A fantastic way to do that is a tech team. Kind of with that framework, is there anybody else on the panel? And if Kathy is still in the room, but I think she has, no, Kathy's still there, talking about multi-agency funding projects or coordination or tech teams or anything of that sort.
Hi, this is Kathy. Yes, there are a lot of projects that will require multiple funders, and I mean, Dave's given the best advice to start early and talking to people, figure out what your strategy is for the planning phase, the design phase, the construction phase. There's some kind of rules of thumb that I use for wastewater projects. I would say it's usually best to apply to ecology first and maybe see what the offer is with them, and then can move on and apply for other funds. I mean, this is just general advice rather than like say applying for CDBG first. I should maybe ask Jackie to talk about how, like for CDBG, since it's a 100% grant program, the kind of guidance or advice that CDBG staff would give before applying for CDBG funds.
Thank you, Kathy. Yeah, so with CDBG, our maximum grant amount for construction projects is 900,000. So depending on the type of project, that may not fulfill the whole project funding need. So we definitely would want to work with clients to make sure that they are looking at all options to be as ready as they can be. And then also I would, always suggest that they have their planning, their general sewer plans and their water system plans as far as along they are in that process. Having them approved just makes them more ready for the construction projects.
But I would say, yes, there's an opportunity to kind of plan ahead so that, each of the programs has different requirements around environmental and cultural review, around just many components of the project. And so it's good if you can kind of plan ahead to coordinate on those so you don't end up redoing certain things. So looks like Dave or somebody is showing you a page on our IACC website.
Kari's got the website up.
Thanks, Kari, where you can submit
information about a project that you're working on through our portal there. And if you need advice on how to proceed on any given infrastructure project. So I will be the one that will call you up if you submit this technical assistance request, and you may or may not need a tech team meeting. Sometimes there might just be one funder that can fund your particular project. And so I would kind of talk about that with you, get you in touch with the right person. In the case where it's not clear who the best funder would be, or if there would be multiple funders, then we'll pull together a meeting of everyone and kind of plot out an action plan for the community. So those of you that were at the conference last year might remember we announced that you can now, request technical assistance year round. And I'm glad we opened this up since we weren't able to be together in Wenatchee this year with the usual tech team meetings. So again, I think Kari is going to put the link to where you can request technical assistance up.
Yep, I put that in the chat for the link, or you can go to the IACC website and go into technical assistance here. And then it moves into a little survey that you would fill out, and then Kathy would be identified or notified of this email, and she would start researching and reach out to that community that had suggested it.
Thanks, Kari.
You're welcome.
And then I guess I would just add kind of the unspoken context of multiple funders is financial hardship. If your utility is able to take on debt, there are multiple loan programs which can, either independently or in concert, fund the infrastructure that you need. But when a community is trying to really conscientiously bring together as much grant funding as they can to make a project which wouldn't be affordable if it were all debt financed. That's where careful coordination with all the funders, a really solid tech team process can really help coordinate the various pieces on the board so that they work together. And I see two other Brownfields questions, so I'll.
David, this is Margot. Can I talk real quick addressing that last question? Kind of ties in with Brownfields too.
Oh, absolutely. Go, Margot.
Thank you.
Sorry, I saw your text. I thought it was about that Brownfields question.
No, it isn't, but thank you. My name's Margot Thompson, and I'm with the Brownfields program here in Washington State. I work for Department of Ecology with Allie. And one of the things I wanted to mention, and I put a link in the chat box, is the EPA resource tool called Road Mapping for Revitalization. They did an incredible webinar, I think it's been a couple months ago, and they recorded it. It's about half hour, 40 minutes to listen to. This link takes you to that. It is well worth your time. They explain what the tool is in really easy terms to understand it. And they also give you examples of what other communities have used to pull together all of their information ahead of time to best leverage funding and other resources that are out there. One of the speakers was a consultant that was working with communities to help do this, and he was just a wealth of information. Another was a local government that talked about how this tool was so valuable for them. So I really encourage you to go take a look at that. It really kind of wraps all the things that have been mentioned in the last few minutes into one tool. Thanks, David.
Perfect. Thanks, Margot. Leslie, is there any other questions in the chat?
I do have a few more questions out there.
Okay.
So one of the questions I believe was answered in the chat, but I wanted to give anybody who wanted to speak to it the opportunity. So if a town wants to have an analysis done on property before purchase and something negative is found, does the property owner have to pay for cleanup prior to sale? And we did have an answer in the chat from Susan Morales.
Hi, yeah, this is Allie. And you know, and Susan did answer that in the chat, and I'll just add to that you know, the property owner may not necessarily need to clean it up, but I think the town that's considering acquiring the property does need to speak to ecology and get an understanding of the potential cost of that cleanup before they acquire it, and understand the funding resources that they may want to tap into. Depending on the extent of contamination, that may change their decision about purchasing or acquiring the property. And they may want to, you know, be working with the seller to negotiate a purchase price or some kind of agreement where there's a collaboration on the cleanup. So it's really important that they reach out to ecology to understand what funding resources may be available, as well as what the cleanup requirements are likely to be based on their reuse plans.
And I'll just add to that, it's really important that you get a hold of ecology first before you purchase, because there are some requirements for you to do some upfront work before you purchase, or you're automatically eliminated from certain funding that may be available later.
Thanks. So another question from the chat. The city of Othello has made an offer on 70 acres of property that would be a wonderful wildlife park, among other things. They did an ESA and found a plume of petroleum that has affected a wetland. How should they navigate that?
So this is Allie again. I would say first off, please shoot me an email or give me a call, because we would want to assess that. We would want to do something about the petroleum plume, and we would also probably work with one or more other programs within ecology since the wetland is affected. And so it would be really important to get in touch with us. We may have some funding resources to help with it, but we want to make sure that the different programs in ecology have an opportunity to weigh in with that wetland being affected. And I would say that the city should chat with us again before they acquire it and understand what the path forward is going to be for addressing the petroleum plume and ensuring the safety of the wetland.
Thank you. And then a final question in the chat, specifically for Jackie and Janice. Can you please talk a little bit more about how your programs can fund community facilities?
This is Jackie with the CDBG program, and our community facility activities are lumped in with our general purpose grant program. So when those applications are due, the client, it's one of the activities that they can apply for. So similar to water, sewer, street, not as competitive maybe as a, it's just maybe the different types of community facilities. But the construction amount is still the same, up to 900,000 in grant.
Yeah, this is Janice. And again, our community facilities program is separate from our wet water and waste program. And we can fund large projects a little easier. We have also partnered with CDBG on projects, but we can fund anything from police, you know, like I mentioned before, police equipment to large city hall. We look at the community and what they can afford. Some grant is there, but it's very small grants. We get typically a couple $100,000 every year to buy equipment for fire and police, public safety equipment. So community can definitely contact the local loan specialists and talk to them about their needs. But we have fund large projects with the regular program. It's loan program.
Thank you. And I do have a follow-up question for Jackie about CDBG funding. Specifically, what are the community facilities that can be funded through CDBG?
It's a wide array, and it depends on eligibility as a whole also, but I would say libraries, fire stations, I believe food banks potentially. I'm trying to, off the top of my head, think of a few more. Those have been, in my experience, have been fire stations recently that apply. Oh, actually, we had a Hoquiam Olympic Stadium, so a community facility that is houses events and similar to kind of park projects. So those tell you a little bit of variety of what we fund recently.
Thanks, Jackie.
Can I add on to that, Leslie?
Of course.
Also, senior centers and community centers are something that we've done in the past as well.
If I can add, that would be something that we would also, RD would also look at was good point, Jackie. Those can be funded also, senior and centers, food banks, that type of project too.
So I'm not seeing any other questions coming in. We did have a little bit of a follow-up on the case studies question that I think was addressed. And I don't know if anybody wants to get into a little more detail about how CDBG, health ecology, rural development, and others can coordinate on projects that need multiple funding partners. I think that was covered, but I just want to give anybody who wants to speak to it again the opportunity. Otherwise, I think those are the only questions we have.
This is Karen. I could speak to that. We actually have a number of project fact sheets that are available, and those project fact sheets indicate where there have been multiple funding sources on a project. And so those are available, and if anyone wants to see any of them, please let me know. Thanks.
Thanks, Karen. And I spoke too soon. We had one more question come in. Is there an email list that folks can sign up for the CV2 and 3 funding information?
This is Jackie, and I actually am going to let Karen Rowe, who I know is participating, also respond to that, and she just did. So thank you, Karen.
Perfect. And another question, LMI ratio is a requirement for CDBG. Do we still need an income survey if we have gone above the threshold, or should we wait for the latest census?
So what I would say with income surveys is right now, the partial guidance we're giving is that if you start an income, if there's a need for you to start an income survey, and I would want you, if you're not sure where your eligibility is, to check in with CDBG staff. And we have a staff on board that leads that income survey effort. You would want to check in and after January 1 of 2021 is, if you've started your survey after that date, it may be eligible longer because there's usually a window of how long your survey is when it's done, can be eligible for the community to apply for CDBG funding. So the HUD numbers do come out every 3 or probably every 4 years. So the last update was in 2019. So those shouldn't change for a few more years. So yeah, if you're considering, if you're looking at your eligibility, you would want to connect with CDBG staff because there's a map we can look at and we can provide other resources to find out and if your LMI percentage meets the threshold.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any further questions, Kari.
Perfect. We just want to thank you all for attending, and I want to thank our speakers, Janet Cherry, Daniel Thompson, Jackie Andreessen, Janice Roderick, Janae Delk, Karen Burkholtz, and Ali Firmal for presenting on this funding panel. We appreciate you and your time providing all this information. And I will hand it off to Dave Dunn.
Fantastic, thank you. So one last point that I would add on funding coordination, and Ashley Probart isn't in the room, but I want to give him full credit because he's got essentially an hour presentation that spells out this idea in detail. But you need to look for a significant chunk of your project's funding. If you spend a year and you coordinate 3 grant programs and y'all work together, and that 3 grants add up to 10% of your project need, your project isn't fundable yet. You don't really have a funding source. You need to get something in place that can fund probably a majority of the project, and then start looking for some of those maybe smaller pieces of the puzzle to fit in there. I think the metaphor might have been, if you get a big puzzle, you work on the sky first because you can find all that, and then you do all the weird little buildings. But anyhow, would add that. So
Dave, this is Janae. I wanted to add on that too. And also there are funders, CURB specifically, and RD sometimes falls into this, that we are gap funding and we have to be the last funder in. So your project has to be, 80% funded, or at least know where you're getting that funding for or from before you apply to us. And we fill that, last 20% or whatever. So knowing that too about your funding is also really helpful. So you don't get ahead of yourself and not be able to put that puzzle together.
Cool. So I had a question for our colleagues over at Department of Commerce. I know a lot of your programs use Zoom grants for your application. Is that in any way affiliated with Zoom, like conferencing?
Nope.
And I only asked because you said the word today and it suddenly occurred to me, wait a minute.
Yeah, no, completely separate. But I would say as staff, at least at CURB, we interchange Zoom and Zoom grants all the time. So they essentially could be the same.
Fantastic. So we need to close the meeting at 10 o'clock so that we can set up the 10:15 presentation. But so we've still got 7 minutes here. And so I'm going to try an experiment. And this might be I don't know if this is going to work or be an absolute hot mess, but I've just given everyone the ability to unmute. And I'm seeing so many names in my chat panel that I feel like, oh, I need to sit down with you, and oh, we need to talk about this. Oh, I need to catch up with so-and-so. And I thought at 8 a.m. this morning, I was missing in person in Wenatchee, but now that I see the names, oh, I'm really missing in person in Wenatchee. So if anyone in the audience wants to unmute themselves, you have that capability. Say hello, or whatever you would do if we were in the convention hall and bumped into each other.